それではここからです。
And now we're going to be going into the panel discussion, and Mr. Yoshimoto, Mitsuhiro Yoshimoto, that is, of Nisei Research Institute, is going to be the facilitator. Thank you. I'd like to express my thanks to the four speakers for your fantastic presentations, and I'm feeling a tremendous amount of pressure because I know that everybody has heaps of questions just churning around in their minds. And we asked if anybody had questions before we started this meeting. And I'm going to be picking up some of the key points that are raised, but we only have about 30 minutes left. So I don't know how far we're going to be able to go through this list of questions. Now, the forum title is about the nationwide rollout of the cultural program, and some of the people who are here come from local authorities and regional governments. A lot of questions were about that point of, well, Mr. Paul Kaynes spoke about the West Midlands, and you gave us a lot of examples of programs which you had, and in Japan as well. The different regions are going to be putting together their plans and the programs. Could you walk us through the process of how you created the ideas, going through the planning, and how you went to implementation? You had the festival, you had the Cultural Olympiad, then you have Inspire, and the community games. There are different types of activities, and the programs seems to be so very diverse. Were they all dreamt up and created in the West Midlands and originated there? And did you decide which fell into Inspire, for example, the Cultural Olympiad or whatever, with the organising committee? Is that how it went?
Yes, thank you. There were an extraordinary range of programmes in every region, I think, of England and the nations of the UK. You've got to remember that this happened over quite a long period of time. So when I started in 2008, really the only programmes that were substantially on offer and on the table were those that were going to be funded by the Legacy Trust. We knew that we had money that we could access if we could create a compelling and convincing case for how we were going to deploy that money in the West Midlands. And what I did is I worked with a very wide range of the cultural agencies. At that time, there were more cultural agencies than there are now, but we worked with Arts Council England, with the Museums and Libraries Commission, with English Heritage, with the Film Council, the Screen Agency, and a whole range of others, to identify what it was we most wanted to reflect in our programme regionally. And two things came out of that. One was a dance programme, a dance participation and performance programme, which led eventually to 32 different projects being commissioned all across the West Midlands, all of which involved participation in some form or other, and many of which saw large-scale, mainly outdoor performances as their culmination. And the second was the Community Games programme, which I've already told you about. So that was the first stage. As the Cultural Olympiad developed, it became clear, or more and more clear as time went by, how a region like the West Midlands could access each of those in turn. So it was a case, if you like, of negotiating with the directors, the owners, the sponsors of each programme to work out what was possible. In some instances, we decided it wasn't possible. In some instances, we decided that programme, for whatever reason, wasn't for us. There was one programme, for instance, which was only interested in coasts. Well, the West Midlands is the only region in England without a coast, so there was no way we were going to be part of that. But clearly the World Shakespeare Festival at the other end of the spectrum was a very significant programme for us because of the centrality of Shakespeare to at least part of our cultural identity. You asked as well about the Inspire mark and the various kinds of branding that were available. As I hoped I made clear in my presentation, for the audience, it was all London 2012 to them. whether it was the festival, the Inspire Mark, the Cultural Olympiad, torch relay, whatever. All of them were ways of connecting to London 2012. And so I saw it as mine and my team's job to help organisations navigate the branding byways of the Cultural Olympiad and get the right result for them that enabled us to tell the story to the audience about the link between what they were doing in the Games and the Cultural Olympiad. And so, to a certain extent, the very complex hierarchy of brands, whilst important, ultimately became less relevant because of the way in which we chose to promote all of the activity as being linked to the Games.
Thank you very much. And you were talking about the overall structure of the Cultural Olympiad and how the regional programs are positioned in there. I should just like to draw your attention to this report. At the very end, it shows about 1,000 organizations being linked to it in some way. Some of them are tiny community groups, some of them are cultural institutions. I'm interested in the arts community, for the arts organizations, local community groups or whatever. How did you actually get these people to become involved? How did you actually reach out to these people to get them on board?
At the very beginning of my tenure in 2008, I spent, I suppose, the first 6 months on the road around the region. I held a series of roadshows in every major town and county capital. I talked about our dance programs particularly, but also about the range of other projects that people could be involved in. I think probably over the first year and a half of the Cultural Olympiad, I met many hundreds of people one-to-one in that way to explain to them how they could be part of it. But we also published our criteria, particularly for the dance program, for instance, online, so that anybody could develop projects and pitch their ideas to us in a series of pitching rounds that we held every 6 months throughout the first 3 years. And so there were plenty of opportunities for people to find out and to be involved. The Inspire Mark was a completely open program. Any organisation that was not commercial could bid to be part of the Inspire program. We had criteria that were set by LOCOG, very good and clear criteria, that people had to meet in order to gain the Inspire Mark. And we saw a large number of them come through in the West Midlands. We did apply, we were responsible in the West Midlands office for assessing and recommending which projects should be awarded the Inspire Mark to LOCOG. In the early days, when we were all finding our way, that was quite a process of negotiation. But as we all became more trustworthy of each other, it became a much more straightforward process. And if we recommended that somebody should be awarded an Inspire Mark, they were.
Hi.
Thank you. And so the different regions had creative programmers such as yourself, and there were 13, I understand. And Fran, you were at LOCOG, I understand, and you were in contact with the programmers, I suppose. With different programmers in the different regions and nations, all with different takes and different identities, how did you actually bring them all together and fold it into this gigantic thing called the Cultural Olympiad? Because I think that's really one of the key questions that everybody's burning to learn more about.
I think the short answer to that is with difficulty, because inevitably 12 or 13 different people. We had 13, by the way. There were 12 people in each of the nations and regions in the United Kingdom, plus one additional creative programmer who was based in East London. So inevitably, when you get a number of personalities around the table, each of whom want to make sure that their particular region has its own distinctive voice and flavour, there are going to be challenges. But what we did was try to set very clear criteria around what we were looking for in terms of a programme, of how the Cultural Olympiad worked, and then really trust in those individuals to go and do a fantastic job in their region. I had somebody in my team whose job it was to speak to and work with the creative programmers on a daily basis, and to problem solve and to talk to them about how things were working in their particular region. And we met with the creative programmers on a monthly basis, where people would come together and we would have robust meetings and conversations about how the program was working and how the program was going. But I think again it comes back to having this one vision, one understanding and one brand that can then be taken and interpreted in a number of different ways, but with a degree of consistency.
One vision, one theme, one brand. I think a lot of people have repeated the importance of having that singularity, that uniformity. But there are some regions who want to do their own thing, who want to be individual, leave the entire country behind, they don't care about the entire country. Were there any regions like that who want to do their own thing?
Of course. Of course. And there is always a balance to be struck around having one single national plan and regional differentiation and interpretation. But I think for me it comes back to why are we doing this and who are we doing it for? If you're doing it to further a local political agenda, then that's a bad starting point. We should be doing it for local people, local artists, people who want to enjoy and experience and presumably are helping to fund the entire programme across the country. So I think if you put the audience at the starting point and the heart of what it is you're trying to do, it's much easier to find a common ground, albeit with your own regional or local city flavour.
Hi.
Thank you. And in the rollout across the nation, across the United Kingdom, the Arts Council England, I understand, was extremely important. You played a crucial role in doing that across the UK. Could you talk about the difficulties? This question is for Nick. What difficulties? What do you think you were particularly clever about? What do you think you could have done better? And what do you think Japan should avoid doing?
Really interesting question, and one which I'm unable to answer because I wasn't at the core of those activities at the time. I'm going to see if I can land this one on Fran, actually, who may have some remarks that she can make to tell us more about it. Can you, Fran?
Actually, I think the Arts Council played a really, really fundamental role in relation to 2012 because they were a trusted partner of the arts organisations within the United Kingdom, within England, because arts organisations were used to working with the Arts Council. They understood the system of arts funding, they understood the system of arts reporting, and so they were actually really able to communicate effectively with the arts organisations around expectation and take them on a journey. Also, they were valuable to us within the organising committee because the organising committee, as I mentioned before, is made up of largely of people who are there to put on a sports event. Their specialism isn't necessarily, or their sympathies aren't necessarily around arts and cultural programming. So it was vital for us that there was an organisation such as the Arts Council who had that expertise that was able and willing to share and was very generous, in fact, in sharing its opinions and its systems and its staffing in order to help deliver this. So they played an incredible role.
Nick, have you got anything to add?
Well, thank you for that generous answer for the Arts Council. But I think there is a great power in having a national agency for the arts, which has relationships, as I mentioned, not just with the 700 organizations it regularly funds, but with many thousands more artists and organizations who have come to us for project funding. And for all of this work to be within the vision of a strategy that has been consulted on with all of the artists and arts organizations across the country, and into which all of those organizations have bought. What one gets is the tremendous diversity across the regions and across the art forms that many of us have described, but within some sort of singular vision. And I think it was perhaps that kind of strategic coherence that we were able to bring. Fran sort of said this, but that strategic coherence was really important.
Hi.
Thank you. And on the same note, Mr. Graham Sheffield, well, the British Council is really like the Japan Foundation, I understand. And you promote international exchange, international understanding. What exactly did the British Council do? I understand that the Arts Council England was extremely important. Could you help us to understand more about the actual relationship and the activities of the two organizations?
Yeah, I think, there we are. As Nick said so generously, I mean, we really began to work very closely together, sort of in the run-up to 2012, and obviously since then. I think where we were able to help, and we did have our own unit within the British Council that was dedicated to this program, so we set aside special resources. But I think what we brought to the table was an ability, in a way, listening to Paul earlier on, the rest of the world was another of the regions in this, if you can sort of invert your thinking a bit. And we were able to follow the strategic framework that had been set and enrich it, I hope, with the infusion of the international element to the main program. So we were able to facilitate collaborations overseas with British artists and international artists who then came to the Games, came to the Olympiad. And we were able to use our international network, as I said in my few words, to bring the rest of the world into that cultural Olympiad in the way that Paul was able to bring all the local communities in the UK. Which I hope that's clear. And I think something that I was reflecting on during the sequence of presentations was even though none of us had seen each other's exam homework before, we all were coming up with similar ideas, which must, I think, probably give you a few clues. So we weren't cheating. And secondly, the difference between thinking of the vision as too much in terms of program terms. I think the vision has to be bold and very simple. And I think how I would define it a bit is how I've tried to bring together the British Council's arts program overseas, is that I don't try and be prescriptive from the centre. I try and to set a framework, what I call a liberal framework of key principles, and allow the regional and country programmers around the network to interpret that for their own communities. And I think that's a sort of international projection of what Paul and Fran and Nick were saying. So I think that's quite a key element to this. And if I may answer a question you haven't asked, because I should have been in politics. The question is, I think what in terms of the international element to this, I was thinking again during this, is what Japan, all of you might like to consider the international role of this, is how do you embody a new Japanese confidence in your own contemporary culture in this, but then how can you partner in arts and culture with other successful sectors of your economy? I mean, Paul again gave a great example of how arts and engineering can work together, for example, and arts and digital is probably an obvious one for Japan to go for here. But then what international cultures are you particularly keen on developing an interest and an understanding of within the Cultural Olympiad? And how can you reflect that internationalism within that overall brand?
はい、
Thank you for this unposed question and the answer to the question. Now I'd like to ask Paul. There was this practice on the Arts Council England, and there were arts proposals from the council, and also there was this proposition which traveled around the world. And so in that respect, there were participation from about 204 organizations around the world, a total of 50,000 participating. So there is a local, international, and the different types of platforms wherein all the participants will be able to show their own talent and to try to encourage the growth of culture in these different regions. And I would be very much interested in knowing your impressions on this.
OK。個別
Not the individual projects, but by participating in this Cultural Olympiad, new phase to the West Midlands cultural activities may have emerged, and therefore I was wondering if there were, what kind of impacts there were through this kind of an event into the West Midland culture.
Yes, I think I understand what you want to know, which is about the impact of involvement in the Cultural Olympiad for the cultural organisations of the West Midlands. Is that right? Yes. Well, there have been all sorts. The three visions that I think we aimed to deliver on have largely been delivered. Many of the people who started participating in arts and culture through the Cultural Olympiad have continued to do so. I think there have been maybe three things beyond those original visions which have been realised. One is around the volume and quality of outdoor arts work. The West Midlands before 2008 was not a particularly strong region in terms of presenting outdoor arts. And it is now a very strong region in terms of presenting outdoor arts, but perhaps even more importantly, having artists based there who want to create outdoor work. And for instance, Motion House, who took part in the voyage, were the creators of the voyage, have gone on to have a very successful outdoor career. They had done outdoor work before, but it's now become a really central part of their offer. And there are dozens of companies for whom that is the case. So that's the first thing. The second thing is around local authorities' understanding of what a collaborative approach to culture can bring, the benefits of working in that way. We had some very enthusiastic councils in the West Midlands, Coventry City Council perhaps the most enthusiastic because it had been working in that way for some time, and therefore it knew what it could achieve by investing in culture and working collaboratively with arts organisations and other kinds of organisations. But in fact, as a result of the Olympiad, many other authorities have sat up and taken notice of that. So whilst they may not have as much money as they used to have, the local authorities have got smarter and cleverer ways of working that bring together partnerships that can deliver events of higher impact. And then this is a particularly West Midlands one, I think, although it may be that it happened elsewhere in the UK, which is that the local media companies really committed to covering culture and have continued to do so. We were very fortunate in the West Midlands in having a head of region in the BBC who was determined to tell the story of the Games. And she got behind the programme, and it meant that we were able to talk to our potential audience on an almost weekly basis about the power of the Cultural Olympiad and how people could get involved. And that has continued. So that awareness and access to cultural information has significantly enhanced.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you. And the Cultural Olympiad and its impact, the lasting cultural legacy, is something that I think everybody is very interested in. A representative example of that probably will be Hull. You are working in Hull already, and I was wondering if you could share some of the ideas that you have, what you're trying to do. Impact, I suppose, of the legacy of the 2012 Olympic Games is also part of that. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I've been in Hull now for just over a month, so I'm not going to be able to share many of the ideas for 17, not least because we haven't announced them yet. But I think there are many aspects of legacy which are apparent in Hull and its plans for 2017, not least of which is the general appetite among cities in the United Kingdom for large-scale cultural interventions. I think people saw what happened in London in 2012 and around the rest of the country in 2012 and began to understand really the impact that can be made through arts and culture. And that's had a knock-on effect. So the council itself, the local authority, has a confidence about arts and culture having the potential to impact on the residents and the citizens of the city. They have a willingness to take risks, I think, in a way that perhaps wouldn't have existed prior to 2012, because they trust in their artists and they trust in their cultural organisations to do a great job because they saw it firsthand in 2012. I think another aspect of legacy is that we now have a much more demanding and intelligent audience because people have experienced a wide range of activities on their doorstep and are now making demands of us as cultural programmers to think about programming something above and beyond that's not just the usual fare, something that's a bit more challenging, something that is more stretching. And I think, importantly, that government, both local government in Hull certainly, but also central government, now really has begun to understand the power of culture around regeneration, around health and well-being, around skills and in employability. So it has the ability to make the case for culture on a number of different fronts. So I think we can't trace all of this back to 2012, but I think it certainly helps make the case, and Hull, I think, is a living legacy of some of the positive effects of 2012 and the Cultural Olympiad.
Do you mind if I just say something about Hull as well? Not the time. Just to add a little bit, because although I'm not working for Hull, we've been in touch with them for about a year at the British Council, and it's amazing how developed they are in terms of what they want to achieve, not only locally but internationally. And that probably came as a bit of a surprise initially. But if you look at the history of Hull and its history in trading with the Baltics and the Nordic countries, it's an east port on the northeast side. It's trading, it's the home, a very controversial home of slavery. It was the home of the William Wilberforce and the whole Wilberforce and slavery story linked particularly to Sierra Leone, where we're trying to help as well with a new story around this. It's interesting how you can play, and this is what I'm sort of offering as a thought to those of you working in some of the regional coastal areas around Japan, is where are your local historical roots and where are the international links that came from? So you can build an international story around your local history. And I think that's what Hull is, am I right? And that's what I think Hull is trying to do, so that the impact is huge.
Completely. I think Hull has an ambition to be the epicenter of arts and culture for the United Kingdom and internationally for 2017. It's a big ambition, but I think we have quite a lot of the tools in place in order to be able to deliver on some of that at least. And as Graham says, we have an enormous history of sending people and ideas around the world, not least the abolition of slavery. So yes, international, local, national, all in one. And I think that sort of activity at those various different levels and scales is something that has been learnt from 2012.
はい、ありがとうございます。この
Thank you. And in the morning, we are having a discussion, and Hull is. It's one of those places which we, for example, have hardly ever been able to identify on a map. They have a lot of social issues, I understand. I'm sorry. But I know it's going to change, won't it? It's going to be transformed. The point is that Hull, which has a lot of issues, is going to try to transform itself through the means of arts and culture, which I think is a major, major legacy of London 2012. So looking at it on the nationwide level, Arts Council England, the biggest legacy of London 2012, what is the biggest legacy of 2012? Seen from Arts Council England perspective.
There are so many different things to say, but the thing I'd like to focus on is a shift in our approach, I think, as a country, to what public benefit means. I think up until the Games, as I sort of mentioned in my presentation, there was this idea that you had to fund work by English artists for English audiences to be honestly generating public benefit in England. All of that's changed in the sense that it's now understood that there is a much wider interpretation of what might benefit artists and audiences within England. In fact, the boundaries have come down. So the rich seams of new experience and new aesthetic that you get by being very open to exchange with international artists and other countries has become something that has been accepted as part of the narrative of the arts in England. There was a time, I think, when there was a sort of feeling, well, the British Council do all that international stuff and the Arts Council do the stuff at home, and sort of never the twain shall meet. And all of that has changed, I think, infinitely for the better, and is reflected in the remarks that you were making, both of you, and Graham, about Hull, and was certainly true in Londonderry, which Graham mentioned in 2013. So I think there's a really important hint there that by welcoming the world and being open to international artists and exchanges, one creates a richer offering for one's own citizens, as well as being more open to a kind of global community.
グラハムさん、今の
do you have anything to add, Mr. Sheffield?
As you can see, Nick and I are sort of joined at the hip, and I should almost offer if he wants to do my job. I couldn't have put it better myself. Can I say anything more? I think I suppose the only thing I would say is that what I've been impressed by in the operation of and the change, and I think this may also be a different answer to your question, is the change in the cultural sector within not only England but the whole of the UK, is I think it has become much more confident in articulating the benefits it brings to society without necessarily always asking for more money from government. I think we've become better at partnering each other. I think we've become better at collaborating. I think we've become more aware of a more pivotal role we are playing in society at large, and we're encouraging each other to think of the benefits we bring and can bring to our fellow citizens, not just through a great arts performance, but through social transformation, and not by demeaning the quality of the art in any way. The excellence of the art, as I think Fran and Paul would do, and Nick, the excellence of the art can go hand in hand with the benefit to society without in any way compromising quality. And I think that's the strength that a strong curators, but also open minds, can bring. And I think maybe if you can embody, I'm sure you're all confident people, but collectively you can probably demonstrate a greater confidence with the politicians, whether national or local, and that will bring you a fantastic program, I'm sure.
はい、ポールさんお願いします。
Yes.
Add to that, I think Graham's absolutely right. And there are some very practical ways in which some of those kinds of partnership legacies are happening. Almost immediately after the end of the Cultural Olympiad and London 2012 Festival, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport announced a number of national programmes, such as the 1418 Now programme, marking the centenary since the First World War, and also the celebration of 1,000 years since the signing of the Magna Carta, which is happening this year. Those kinds of programmes and the approach to the programmes that were taken were very much informed by the experience of those kinds of partnerships that developed during the Cultural Olympiad. And one of the other things that happened during the Cultural Olympiad was that some extraordinary events that were delivered for relatively small sums of money had huge national reach. We've already referred to All the Bells, the Martin Creed work that happened on the opening day of the Games. But there were actually several examples of those kinds of projects where just a brilliant idea sparked off a whole nationwide programme of joining in celebration and being part of a great contemporary work of art. And that kind of approach can deliver extraordinary impact for relatively little investment.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you. And we were told that we should end 5 minutes ago, and we have to end. Final questions. We really have to get out of here, so could you please be quick? We are 5.5 years before the actual year of the Olympic Games, and everybody here comes from different positions, but they all want to do something for the Cultural Olympiad. So, any message from each of you? From you, Mr. Sheffield? Just one phrase will be enough. We really have to be out of here. We had to be out of here 4 minutes ago.
No, absolutely. My one phrase was, as I was sitting with you over lunch, I said, after this workshop, after this seminar this afternoon, why don't a few of you get together and have a really good brainstorm about what that bigger vision might be, that very simple cut-through idea, and see whether you can come up with something that you can all or most of you buy into. We're happy to help if you need a referee, but that's my idea.
Nick?
One of the things that we found, and we continue to find, is that it seems scary sometimes to trust artists, but trusting artists can be very, very powerful. And when Ruth Mackenzie came on board, her watchword is always, let the artists do their thing. It doesn't matter what it looks like at the beginning, it will always turn out well. And so I would say, trust the artists. Support them and trust them.
はい、ありがとうございます。フランさんお願いします。
I think mine is aligned to both of those previous things, which is trust each other. I think if you can put aside your individual organisational agendas and priorities and trust in the project and remember that who you're doing it for, then you'll go a long way. So it'll help you find that one vision, that one everything, and you'll get a better result.
And I would echo something I said earlier, which is locally particularly, if you're outside of Tokyo and you're developing ideas around a cultural programme now, then find local leaders and champions, not necessarily from the cultural sector, although they may be from the cultural sector, but from outside as well. Get the athletes and the sports people on board, get the business people on board, create an alliance of people who are going to champion the cultural activity in your area and be its advocates and leaders.
Thank you for these messages from the four presenters. We'd like to conclude the session, but one last note from myself. A year ago, we did have participants from the UK and conducted a similar forum. And then we felt that there's culture in the Olympics, but now after 1 year, people are starting to think with this kind of concept in mind. And I think that we're making advances. And as the people have just mentioned, you mentioned that there were about 200 who have or who are going to be providing foundations for the Japanese Cultural Olympiad. So we would have to place emphasis on the base of people and to try to get cooperation from all the participants today and from the panelists today. Thank you very much for all you have done for us today.